Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to Lunch with Books. My name is Sean. Just a few announcements before we begin. As usual, if you wouldn't mind turning off your cell phones at this point. The Upper Ohio Valley Historical Review, the new one, Winter 2022, has been published. You can access it free online as a PDF and download it yourself. We do have a few print copies left. Many were bought here today, but they have 10 to 12 upstairs at the circulation desk. If you're interested, they're only $5. It's called Wheeling in 50 Objects. So we kind of picked the 50 objects that best describe wheeling to someone who's never heard of it. That's the goal. I'm sure there will be plenty of disagreement on what the objects were, but that's fine. That's part of the fun, and hope you like it. This Thursday at 7 at the People's University Ancient History, we start with Greece, the first part of Greece, Minoan, Mycenaean, and Homeric, with Maria Pareja. Her students call her Doc, and she's a Bronze Age Aegean archaeologist and an art historian. And we'll continue with, we'll have 3 sections about Greece before we get to Rome. We've done Egypt the first 2 weeks. Okay. Next Tuesday, we have a special program on the 24th at noon, which references a newspaper article called Disturbance at Chapline Street. And we have a panel that features Douglas Branham, Pam Dudley, George Lee, and Marlene Sinclair Midget about an incident, a clash between police and people, African American people primarily, on Chapline Street, January 1971, so 52 years ago. And we're going to talk about the history of that and what happened. Before I introduce our guest for today, I want to bring up the teacher responsible for bringing these fine students from Valero over. You recall a couple weeks ago we had a program about Mr. Hess and Dottie Thomas, and she has something to say. Rebecca DiFabrizio.
Thank you. I've been an educator here in the Ohio Valley for 29 years, and I just want to say this Lunch with Books program has been such a blessing to so many of my French and Spanish students over the years. We truly enjoy coming and listening to the cultural and musical presentations, and we are so fortunate that all of you make space for us. We want to thank you for that. My father, Joseph George, he graduated from Wheeling University in 1963, and as a child, I came to really know this area, mostly because he would drag me and my siblings back for reunions and things. But later, I myself became a graduate of Wheeling Jesuit and loved the area so much, I made it my forever home. In coming back to the area, I met with my father's former law school roommate and classmate, Ted Hess. And I would come to have some wonderful encounters with him through Rotary, here at the library, and many other different civically minded organizations. He was such a wonderful man. And so on behalf of my father, his friend, I would like to donate to the library not only this book, but also a monetary donation that I hope will help to continue the Lunch with Books program. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thanks for bringing the kids. We like having them here. Our presenter today is Darryl Clausell. He is a longtime president of the Wheeling branch of the NAACP and the retired coordinator of continuing and community education at West Virginia Northern Community College. And he's here to tell you the fascinating history of a building that still stands, the Pythian on Chapline Street. Here's Darryl Clausell.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm so thankful to be here and have this opportunity to speak before you. Titled this Reliving the Pythian. Let me just tell you a little bit about where this originated from. Back 1988, I actually had worked with an individual who I see in the back of the room. I call her my mentor from years ago. That's Margaret Brennan. And there was a grant that was written to the West Virginia Humanities Foundation because there came an era where history back at that time became very important. And there were some individuals I got a chance to work with, the Kleins, Margaret, and Brent Carney. I don't know if those names reflect, but I was actually, there's a chapter in Brent Carney's book that actually outlined the African American community. And so my interest took off from there, and I've been collecting African American history since that time and have a vast archives. So I want to set the stage for you because I heard some conversations as I was listening. And when you say the Pythian building, I heard some conversations. Oh yeah, that was the building over by West Virginia Northern. And one thing about Wheeling, when you set the stage, this is going to take us all the way back to at least it was 1925 or before. And so if you think back at that time, segregation and integration came through, I believe, with the schools around 1943. So we're, before that, in a community, a thriving community that is a history and a culture that we don't see in Wheeling today. And the reason for that is a lot of change, urban renewal, where the communities were, etc. So let me go ahead and get started, and we would talk about, as you can see, when you talk about the Pythian building, you talk about the origins and patterns of the Black community, because it's all tied in. And as you can see, if you look at that, that's the neighborhood. I'm not sure if that's not that readable, but those are the buildings along 12th and Chapline Street is where this presentation is taking place. And it was from a North Wheeling neighborhood that started with the Black community, went through 12th Street. And if you know, that's where in that building used to be a printing shop called Pearson and Pearson, I believe it was called. Yeah, okay, now we're there, yeah. And when we went into that building, when it was acquired, that's like 4 floors, no elevator, a rooftop. And there were printing machines, huge printing machines on every floor. And I'm still trying to figure out how they got those machines up and down those floors. So then up to Grandview and North for at least 5 streets was a very established neighborhood. So you're thinking this neighborhood in the air of about 1925, when there was a divide, I call it, in Wheeling of communities. Thank goodness we've come a long way, huh? So in the 1920s, it was a time of prosperity in Wheeling. And why? And it was for the Black community because of what was called the Harlem Renaissance. If you know about the Harlem Renaissance, a little bit of it, that was a time period where arts, culture, African-American arts, culture, music really took off. You had individuals like what you saw traveling all over, Count Basie, Bessie Smith, Fats Domino. These are some names that was associated then at that time. There was a history we did of a woman or a child at the time named Catherine. And Catherine grew up in this neighborhood. And this is what she said. Catherine grew up and her grandmother owned her house. That was very important at that time, to have ownership of a home in a community of segregation. Her aunt and uncle, who had married in 1905, had lived there and since owned that house. Thereafter, Catherine inherited. But here's, we think about at that time the buildings that we look at in Wheeling. Well, even in that neighborhood, what she was so proud of was the fact that it had a mahogany fireplace mantles, which she believed to be hand carved. And when one was removed for repair, it actually bore the maker's name. That was the proudness of that community. They owned something. It was rich, and they were able to survive, and it was family. Within the neighborhood was places that we have to reflect to in order to get to the Pythian building. And one of those, which even brought the placard, was Lincoln School. And you can see Lincoln School, the neighborhood kids, I reflected this in a story from one of the individuals that lived there. When they closed Chapline Street in the wintertime, they used that as a sled riding ramp to go up and down the hill and have fun. Especially if Lincoln School was closed, they had to have something to do. So Lincoln School and the churches were also located in the neighborhood. This neighborhood was continuously occupied and maintained by owners up through at least World War II. An excellent grocery store was located at 10th Street and Market, owned by a Black resident named Clark. And just remember, why was all of this neighborhood there? Because you didn't have that opportunity for some of the young ones in the back. You didn't have that opportunity to shop or go where you wanted to. So this thriving neighborhood was the sufficiency for that particular culture and population. And so, everything existed there. And I'm going to go through a little bit of walking up and down the street of what was there. Other popular stores included the Pythian Lodge, that it was called, and I brought the banner. That's the original banner, donated to me years ago, brought to me by Margaret Brennan. That was the Black Knights of Pythias. And backing up a little bit, when I say the Black Knights of Pythias, I want you to understand today in Wheeling, there was and I hate to reflect this way, but there was the white Pythian building, there was the Black Pythian building. We still have it today. There's the White American Legion, there's the Black American Legion. There's the Black Elks, there's the White Elks. Why is this still there today? Because of heritage. Actually, it's heritage. But guess what? I know for a fact that all of those fraternal orders work back and forth with each other and get along. That's what I've understood. But it's the heritage of just the way it's come through. But the mindsets have changed. Other popular places as I was saying, include the Pythian Lodge and the theater. There was a theater within that building called the Fedo Theater, and we're going to elaborate more on that. It was a three-story structure, if you can envision it, with enormous ballroom. Catherine always remembered hearing this particular person, Fats Waller, perform there, a very large man who played a very small white piano on wheels. And he would play and travel back and forth across the stage while he was playing. But that's just the entertainment that came through at that time. James Brown was another one. These fine Black facilities attracted the top Black entertainment and community support from both sides of the river. Also, there was a place right coming down the street, and we'll talk about it, called Doc White's Pharmacy, as we relive that neighborhood. In the 1960s, as the neighborhood started changing, some of the older residents died off. Their heirs had left the city, maintaining the structure somewhat less, and a lot of it became rental property. At one time, it was discovered that this was a very, very prosperous area for downtown Wheeling. And I'm just jumping a little bit, but what happened was, because that was noted, they started tearing down the buildings. A lot of buildings, the land was sold off, eminent domain came through. It was called urban renewal, and it wiped out that entire Black community. And that today, that history has scattered itself to a point where to try to collect it back is a process, because so many of the individuals who lived it have passed on. To give you a oversight, and then we'll get into more of the Pythian, just to go through it, which in there, the hub of the black business, if you look on the corner there, and you're coming through, that large building is the Pythian building. And you can see, I think it's the sign there that says the Pythian. And that's coming down Chapline Street on the right-hand side. Some of the places along there, as you're coming down that street, and I'm just trying to read my own handwriting, was at the top of Chapline Street, where the windmill was, there was Lincoln School was in there. Across there was a lot they called it the Greens. And that's where all the children played when they were around Lincoln School. Down from there were some houses. And then coming on down on the right-hand side, there was an organization called the Beau Brumbles. They had a group home there. Then there were more houses, and then there was the Elks coming down. From there then was Wayman Church's parsonage. And after that was a dwelling, hair shop, and then the alley. And then across the street from there was the Pythian building. And on the other side of the Pythian building was a barber shop, and then Doc White's pharmacy. And on the opposite side of the street, coming down, and I'm taking this from a person who was there in the 60s, at that time, was Dr. Houston Lewis was a dentist. He had a shop on the other side. And then from there, was near 4th Street United Methodist Church, was the American Legion. So that gives you an idea of the kind of business that was within that community. Some of the other places was in there, the streets, you had Morrow Street, which and High Street, they were on the other side where it used to be Lincoln School in East Wheeling. And then Charles Street was also there. Like I said, the community had to make itself self-sufficient. And what I mean by that, just to give you an overview, the Negro in Wheeling at that time, it was called, taken from a 1920 yearbook of Lincoln School, did an assessment, and the estimated population within that community in the spread out streets was 3,000 people. At the time, the estimated property holdings was 150,000. If that community was still prospering today, you'll see where it'd be a diverse segment of Wheeling, which is what we're trying to do. Church life, there was a Baptist church, a Methodist church, an African Methodist Episcopal church, a Church of God, and the Saints of Christ Church. Their value was estimated at $64,800. You had one minister, a woman who was in charge of a spiritualist church. But listen to this in the professions. You had 5 ministers, 4 doctors, 1 dentist, 2 lawyers, 14 teachers, music teachers 1, editors 1, and an embalmer 1. You had business enterprises, newspapers, hotels, restaurants, ice cream parlors, barbershops, shoe shining parlors, newsstands, an art repair shop, general transfer service, billiards, and house cleaning contractors, caterers. And so that's how prosperous through this time the neighborhood was when it came to why the Pythian building was constructed. With all that work and all that money, what did somebody need? We needed to have some fun. We had to have a place for recreation and entertainment. And that's the Pythian building. So the Pythian building became the hub, the entertainment hub of that area. And some of the businesses within the Pythian building that made it a hub. Here's one, and this sign is still in that building on the door. It was called the Friendship Club Members and Guests. Originally also known as the Palm Garden, from 1938 on, it served many a client. And that was a place where everybody gathered. The adults gathered there. The children gathered at Doc White's pharmacy because he had a place downstairs called Teen Time. And Doc White, that's how the children were raised to respect their elders. And Doc White would charge you a quarter, I think it was a quarter or a nickel, if he heard you say a cuss word, and you'd have to go home to your mom. So, but that, that's where, that's why it became the hub and the entertainment complex for the area, because people, that community could not go downtown. They couldn't just walk downtown. Think through your mind in that area. They couldn't walk downtown and decide to go into the local Victoria or the Coronet. I think those were some of the theaters at the time. You couldn't go to the ice skating rink. So you had to be self-sufficient for your own entertainment. This is within that Palm Garden. If you go down the alley, there's an alley right beside the building. There's a door, and you enter. There's 3 pieces of artwork on the wall still, and we're trying to salvage it as we work to restore this building. The first one I just made fun was Place Your Bet. It's a picture of the horse races, and we know Wheeling's known for that. So whether it was this culture or that culture, I ask myself within the lounge, because you're going there, I know for a fact, even though I wasn't born and raised in Wheeling, there was this thing called numbers. And I don't know if you know, maybe that was just in the Black community, but I just know that my dad used to play it with pennies, and he didn't want to gamble a lot, but he surely plays his bet for pennies. So I thought, well, maybe this was the back area when you go in to place your bet. Another picture there, picture 2, is actually, I did find out who this was, and I originally put Jackie Robinson, but we found out it was Satchel Paige. And if you know about the Negro League, baseball enjoyed periods of success in the early 1920s, and again after the Great Depression. So this community was right in line with what was going on nationwide. But you realize at the time, Wheeling was hustling and bustling. I know you know that. Everything was happening in Wheeling, not just in this community, but it was prosperity all over. You can look at the homes and know that and everything that was going on. So the third one is a boxer. Oh, that's interesting. Sorry about that, but it did flip. But if you can't, I'm hoping that these pictures can be restored as we restore this building. But to understand this picture is to understand the boom in boxing. You can see it, horse racing, baseball, and boxing. We all know that was it. That was the big thing at that time. So to understand the boom in boxing during this period of the 1920s, one should picture the ideal of the Roaring '20s. That's what it was about. You're coming in, you're highly dressed, Harlem Renaissance, you have a good cigar and a nice hat. The style was there. That was the glamour. That was the Pythian building. The Pythian building brought the glamour of the Black neighborhood, so that the same entertainment and fun you were having out there in Wheeling, was the same entertainment in this neighborhood. And when it mixed, it should have mixed and grew. But doggone it, Wheeling just, I don't know, maybe we didn't keep up with the pace when we all came together. But it was a festive time where money was in lush supply. The United States was coming off of a momentous victory in World War I. and boxing was able to attract the entertainment dollar with legendary fighters and great fights. And that particular piece of artwork, sorry, it's on that side, was Joe Louis. And you may have heard that. But this exists. I just want you to know, you're talking right up there on 12th Street, that this is all still there. Why wouldn't we want to maintain and try to bring that piece of culture back to Wheeling and utilize it for development of the community, a cultural community? Also, on the bottom floor was what was called the pool room. And once again, everybody likes to play pool. It wasn't just in one community, but this was a huge pool room on the bottom floor, full of pool tables. And many a night, the neighborhood was gathered on the bottom floor of the Pythian to shoot pool. If the walls could talk, what I heard was, all right, you got legendary pool players, you know how it goes. You have the clubs, you lay your money down, and that went on for years. But think of it, in the same breath of what you were doing, because it was segregated, is what this community was doing. And so that's the draw, to know that we sometimes share the same activities, just in different cultures. And when we can understand that we're not that much different from each other, that's when we come together and enjoy life, and life abundantly. So here we go. This is the best picture, and I want to talk a little bit about this. Let's see if I can get that sheet. Here it is. The origin of the Pythian building. When the Pythian building was first going to be erected in 1928, what do you think happened in Wheeling because it was segregation? Real estate barons, those people who didn't want to see this type of development in the Black community, made it impossible to get financing. They were retaliating, and local institutions would go to unthinkable terms to block the development of this business. And why was that? Because even though it was segregated, the prosperity, they knew that this was going to be a profit structured entity. They didn't want to see that Black community growing like that, because they felt it would take away from some of the other, I guess, prosperity in the city. So what happened is an article, and I know this is probably hard to read, but it says the African American Knights of Pythian group erects new building in 1928. The cost was $55,000. The funding came from this gentleman called R.H. Rutherford. He was president and treasurer of the National Benefit Association. They could not get anybody in this area to finance them. No one. They really didn't want them. There's an article, this article that was called Froze Out in Wheeling. They was trying to freeze them out. Rutherford was the son of a founder, Samuel Rutherford, as you can see. He made the arrangements. They had to go all the way to get this money to Washington, D.C. That's the only way they could have, when I say they, that's the Pythian group, the Knights of Pythian. You know, it was a fraternal order. That's the only way they could have erected this and had this come to reality and have entertainment within that community. Other than that, it would have never happened. The architect, his name was Samuel Plato. He also came out of, actually came out of Louisville, Kentucky, but he also worked within the DC area. And they had to get him because there was no architect in the city of Wheeling that would draw the plans for the building. And he was the first African American actually to receive a government contract And he built a lot of post offices as well as this, and he designed 38 different post offices and churches, schools, banks, theaters, and housing within the nation. But he decided to come to Wheeling also. It was very hard to find a black architect at that time.
Excuse me.
Yes.
How many square feet is the Pythian building?
We've got an actual architectural drawing, I think 33,000 in there. Yeah. And I didn't put the blueprints or the architectural drawing, but if you have questions like that, I can actually produce it. It's 4 floors going up, you know. Used to have a rooftop terrace on it. Yeah. So here we go. Samuel Plato did 2 things when he was traveling in this region. He built 2 buildings, and if you look at them, it looks like mother-daughter. The big one, you know, and that's what I call it, mother-daughter, and then Wheeling. The other building, being in Columbus, Ohio, has been restored, and it's gorgeous. I've actually had a look at it. It's called the King Center up there. I would like to see us restore this building to reflect what they've done there as a cultural center. And we're going to come to some of that. But in his travels, if you look at the design, which I'm going to go through a little bit of that. Let me just, oh, here we go. Yeah, I just want to give you a little detail about this comparison. First of all, the Pythian building is listed here local on the National Register. And so it's this one. But it's listed, it's a building that was originally erected as a lodge and a theater, same concept in Columbus. I'm talking about the Columbus building, for members of the African American community living in the Mount Vernon Avenue area to center as a center for the African American life. I'm talking about this building, right? In Columbus. It's the only building in Columbus known to be designed by an African American. And I would believe this one is the same here. And that architect, African American architect, was known as Samuel Plato of Louisville, Kentucky. Plato designed more than, and I went through it, more than just that building, but he also designed many post offices and other dwellings. The brick colonial, this building, and if you look at the view or the comparison, this brick colonial revival building was the design, it was called, had a strong sense of horizontality with a distinct base in stone and marble. And if you look at this building, the only difference is some of the side marble components missing the structure and the pillars, but there used to be pillars on the front of the building and a overhang, as you saw in the one picture, that had the Pythian up above it. It was somewhat a top-heavy it was considered with a distinct base in stone and marble, somewhat top-heavy 4th register, more decorated than the lower registers, and a blind balustraded top with decorative urns. A lot of those things are missing from the Pythian building that was there in Wheeling. It had engaged pilasters, arch transoms, topped with stone lintels and obvious keystones. And if you look at some of the windows and the arches, they've replaced them over here, you'll see the exact same windows and archways that are in Columbus. The building is asymmetric with one bay to the left and a seeming addition, which he didn't put on here. And why didn't he go to that elaborate in Wheeling? Well, for $55,000, considering the size of this other building. That's all that I'm sure we could afford at the time, which was a lot in that area. The Pythian Theater was designed by Samuel. It was built around 1925. I don't know when the Pythian Theater stopped showing movies, but it is still listed in the 1955 Film Daily Yearbook. That's talking up in Columbus. But that theater and that auditorium had 500 seats up there. So this one houses, you'd probably get about 50 seats in it. So you can see the magnitude and the difference of the size. And it took $2.7 million in 1983 to renovate the Columbus building. But it's now called a part of the King Arts Complex. So I just wanted to give you that comparison as to what and where this building originated from. It wasn't like he just traveled through and built this building. He actually was on a circuit, and that was the style in the African American community at the time. Talk about the auditorium in the Fedo Theater. It was said that Fats Waller played here on the stage. Others were Count Bessie, Bessie Smith, James Brown, and many more. Taken from a picture of the renovated building in Columbus, Ohio. That particular picture right there is the auditorium up there. Those lights hanging down and those lights on the wall, if you walk into the Pythian building, you can see exactly the one in Wheeling where that same lights and design in the auditorium is at. It's just, we got to work through cleaning it up. But that's the Fedo Theater was also up elevated so that, and you can see it, the balcony is in there where they showed pictures down to the stage, and there was a drop curtain where they showed the movies and the films. This is just a little bit about the Hilltop Courier, which is where Lincoln School, the Hilltop Courier, circa 1925, talked about the growth of Lincoln School and why it was necessary to expand for theater, or the Pythian building for recreation, because the kids in that area, they were getting many kids. I mean, Lincoln School was growing left and right. It was a busy time, I guess, for families, and that word's important. The concept today that's lost a lot in our community is families, family history. And with this restoration project, it is important that we have in this cultural building something called the Family Wall of Fame. And that's to everybody. That's so that when kids come through, they're able to walk in, punch in their name, and their history pops up. That is so important. A digital wall of fame that allows you to leave that information for your generations to come. That's what we like to see in that restoration. Future plans for the Pythian, and this is the name we're looking to do with this, and you can see the Pythian Club. You had to have a membership. This was a certificate of your membership that we've been able to get, called the Pythian, and they called it the Pythian Club. But we like to look at it as the Pythian Culture and Event Center for the future. We'd like to bring back that type of history and redevelop it for the entire city of Wheeling. I've had a lot of conversation about it. I'm putting together an advisory council to talk about it. Sean and others want to play a role with believing that it's a place where you can go at a neutral ground and look at all history in Wheeling for small settings. We don't want a 500 seat theater. We want a 50 or 75 seat theater that seats enough folks and do the documentaries. The group that's working on this that I'm a part of is called the Ohio Valley African American Historical and Preservation Society. What we're looking at in this building is a renovation for downtown, focusing on cultural, education, health, and economic value. historical programming and collection of the community would be in that, retail shops and education facility. And we love the culture of dining experience. We love to recreate the Palm Garden with a really, really intense menu that's not in Wheeling right now. This would be great. And we would like to see tours and exhibits. In 1988, when we started this, when I started this historical project of documenting African American history, there used to be bus tours coming through Wheeling from New York. And they would stop, and we would make live anything, we could do to get them to come through here as a component of Wheeling's rich history. And we were included. And I'd love to see that happen again, of this rich history of brought together in Wheeling. This is the renovation of Columbus that I put together, just a collage to show various aspects of what can happen as part of when if we could pull this project off. And the people up there love it. I mean, it's utilized space, meeting space, you name it, it's being utilized. I just wanted to talk to you at the end here, summarizing, because like I said, I didn't want to take all day, and presentations can get, if you go too long, you lose the pizzazz. But here's what's happening today as we try to recreate some of the culture of Wheeling and the groups that are working together to bring back a community that was so intense and so vibrant, and so that it reflects back amongst everybody, not a segregated society, but a society that appreciates everybody's history. That's what we want from the Pythian building. That's what it stood for at that time. Even though it served a specific population, it served it in a way that we now can tell you about it and bring it and share all culture as a culture center. So we have a group called Reddick, and that group is a group of individuals who are working to another project under that group. We have the Pythian building under them, they're working side. But Clay School, that was another area that, look, everybody calls it a blight now. It is set in East Wheeling. And there's a group that would like to see Clay School be renovated or torn down and rebuilt as what was called East Village. And the concept of that is it takes a village to raise a child. And so we're working together, these groups, to try to get the city to look at these projects and say, hey, that's a good plan, because it will benefit the entire city. There's another group called the Griot Storytelling Society. That particular society wants to come and tell stories, get together, everybody's telling their story, how they came through, and, coming together and having fun with it. And so I'd like to see them housed as part of the Pythian building. And you've all heard about the Underground Railroad, which is in Flushing, Ohio, but we're trying to get them to expand that to bring a lot of that to Wheeling. So wouldn't it be great if we had this component happening and working within our community, and the entire community of Wheeling, to bring this type of culture together and show America that we in Wheeling, when we say the friendly city, we're friendly to everybody. We break boundaries, and I talk now from my own experience in childhood. Like I said, I wasn't born and raised in Wheeling, but I was raised in a little town from here called, and you might have heard of it, Collier's, West Virginia. Now, I survived Collier's, West Virginia. Let's just make that plain. See, when you laugh, so, yeah, and I went to Follinsby High School, yeah, and And even through the tough times, we still have a good time when I get with my constituents and we talk. And same way in Colliers, West Virginia. So I know that we can bring cultures together and have fun with them, because that's what this is about, learning with books. That's I believe the entire intent is to learn about not just the history, but to learn about each other. And when you sit down and talk, and my time of talking was at the dinner table, you share bread, you break bread. That's what it was about. Now, granted, when I was in Colliers, my mom had a chicken coop. So if that was the case and we broke bread, chicken was probably on the table in some form every day of the week, Saturday and Sunday. And then the other part of that, on Sunday, you always invited the pastor over, because after he preached, he knew he was going to go somewhere for a Sunday meal. So I just want you to understand the traditions. It might sound simple, but in concept, it's what we do. You know, when you get to know someone and you say, hey, come on over, now folks say, let's have a drink together. But I like to say, let's share a recipe together. And we each make something that it's tasty, and we're just checking. And so that, to me, is what it's all about. And with closing with that, once again, I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, I'm open for questions. I just wanted to bring it to you in this way without boring you, but at the same time, enlightening you to know that we can live together, work together, share together, and we can always build together. That's how the concept we should be living by, because everybody was given a purpose in life. That purpose is to help each other. And I hope that's, my way of giving back. So thank you for attending. I just want to share with the contributors. Catherine, I don't know if you heard of this name, but contributors, this actually started as part of a 1988 presentation at Marshall University. Pat Dudley was a name that was in Wheeling. She's, I believe, now in Charleston at the Cultural Center. And I always bring Margaret in. But Catherine Sneed was a big contributor to this, and Dorothy Cooper. They have long passed now, but I just wanted to say, make sure that they were acknowledged, and thank you again for your attention. Any questions? I saw that hand go up first, Victor. Yes, sir.
Thank you for the great presentation. Do you have any sense yet of the cost it would take to renovate where you would want it to be?
The Pythian now? Yeah. According to our architect, and I don't know if I forget his last name, but his first name's Gus. He's the one who was doing the architect drawings we have. It was about 1.5 to actually bring that building back into a complex as to the historical component. Now, there's if we move forward, there's tax credits we can look at, grant monies. So, like I said, I wanted to launch this first. This is the first launch. I only did this because I'm retired now. That makes a difference. I worked at West Virginia Northern for 46 years. So I'm so happy to be doing things by choice now. So yeah, we're about there, and what I'm trying to do is build community support for all of our projects so that they can all come together and we can and be launched together. Yes. I actually have that history with me. I didn't take the time to go, but because of the fact that someone would ask, here it is. That building, actually known as the Black Knights of Pythias, was formed by a Pythian fraternal group called the Knights of Pythias. It's in Greek. It came from Greek historic writings. And at the top of the building, you'll see, I believe, two names, Damon and Pythias. Yep. And it's the legend illustrating the Pythagorean ideal of friendship. How about that? You want me to go further? Is that good? Does that answer the question? You know, because the fact of it is, and it's a good story, Pythias and his friend Damon, both followers of the philosopher Pythagoras, they traveled to Syracuse during the reign of the Tyranian Dion. My eyes, wait a minute, because I'm, 46 years and add on, so I might just look young. Dionysius, yeah, circa 405 to 367 BC. Pythias was accused of plotting against the tyrant, and he was sentenced to death. So it's a great story. It's long, so I won't go through it, but it's a great story. But that's the original. That's where it actually comes from. Any other questions? Yes.
They pulled all their resources, bought a piece of property, built a 3-story tenement. So then families that would immigrate would just cycle through. They would stay, save their money until they were able to buy their own little home. Do you know of anything like any building like that in Wheeling that the community might have also, like they all helped each other to build?
Let me think.
Or do they focus more just on the cultural building?
Culturally, I mean, this particular building, actually, it was a fraternal order, which included families. So groups like, there was the Elks, the Legion, the Beau Brumbles, they basically would be a group that came together and build a building like this. It may not have been totally, they were all family though. They were all considered family. They considered themselves family. And so that's how these structures originated. The houses within the region, by having landowners there. I'm sure somebody helped somebody, somebody helped somebody. That's the way it was in Collier's, West Virginia. Survival was the key word. So when you're on that survival mode, everybody pitches in to help everybody. It doesn't matter race, creed, or color. When I was in Collier's and we sat at the table and was cooking chickens, it didn't matter who was sitting at the table, because in that little community, we were all together. That was the way it worked. And, and that wasn't that was a mixed community, but we all knew that we had to survive. So, the same concept would apply, just in different measures. Any other questions from anyone?
Who owns this?
Right, the owner right now is a gentleman by the name of Dworka Vermeeri. I actually am in partnership with him, and he couldn't be here. Actually, his health is really, bad right now. But he has basically said that if we can redo this, he will give that building to the society, to this particular group, so that it becomes integral into the city of Wheeling. That building sat forever, and he decided to purchase it because when Stanger, I believe it was, pulled out, it was just there. My passion is the fact that it's the last standing African American development or building or dwelling from that time, and I'd really love to see it saved and become part of everything else. There were some other questions. Yeah. Oh, Margaret. In Wheeling, it's actually around, I believe, 4 to 7%. I say 4 based on the census of a population. We're probably, I think my last number was 29,000, somewhere in there. So you do the math. But when you go into the Ohio Valley, that becomes more proportionate to almost, and you look at Steubenville and Weirton taking in at least 10%. Any other? Oh, yes.
I was just it's a comment. when I was a teen, the Beau Brummels were more fun as far as I knew.
Exactly.
But they were relegated to, well, they had dances. I remember that.
Right.
They had dances in the summertime at Wheeling Park at the White Palace, but they weren't able to have them like on a Saturday night.
Right.
They had to have them in the middle of the night.
Exactly.
Anytime when, I guess, the white groups or white people, other people, didn't want the park.
Right.
Didn't want to have that.
They titled them Dust to Dawn dances.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly right.
But boy,
Yeah.
they were a big deal.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's just it. When you think about that thriving community, most of that history is not known. It's got lost. When urban renewal came through it, there was a thriving black community in Wheeling, West Virginia, folks. It was wonderful. It's in the mix. When the mix came, the city, and I'm used to city as the truth, decided, and they made a promise. They told those individuals, if you sell your land to us, or if they didn't sell, they did eminent domain, we will rebuild everything as new apartments and houses for you coming off of Lincoln School, and Lincoln Home, I mean. Yeah, in 12th Street, coming through there. And if you look at it today, you know, there's nothing. I mean, they're talking about trying to make a park out of that hillside now. So that was the promise made, and that's why it's so important to bring back this history as an integral part of Wheeling history. That's the way I see it. It is part of Wheeling history. And everybody should know about it as a learning mechanism of coming together and knowing where we came from. Yes.
Why aren't there any more of our black friends here today?
You know, I can't answer that question, and I can't say they thought it was the other Pythian building. But, you know, it was. Oh, the question is, why aren't there more of a minority or black audience here today? And I really can't answer that. I know that a lot of the individuals who talked to me said they were coming, they wanted to hear it, especially some of the younger gen, and all I can say is something happened. Now I'm hoping that this is a message that as through time these are available, but it's important that the young groups hear this. I just think that sometimes we take for granted in our community, our society, that we basically already know, what's going on. But really, the mind concept is such that it has, because it was scattered, let's put it that way. The history was scattered, the community was lost. That next gen coming through don't really understand this history. And so they don't take it serious, because as long as they're feeding their plates are full, they have a job, they don't really get engaged in believing that this is important. And the structure has changed. I could go into a little bit more detail as to the structure of, and I really probably shouldn't, but when I say the structure of the community, history is lost when you have a tendency to, even though races come together, dating, etc., it sometimes loses the impact of each other to talk about the culture where you come from versus the economic convenience of living together. And let me say the second part, family. I iterated family. The family structure has broken down. And that's not just in the black community, but that's majorly over. And when that happens, you don't get the audience that you really need. Those young folks in the back that this teacher brought, I'm so thankful for them to hear and understand that Bel Air also has a history. And it's that their ears have heard, and they may not have lived it, but now they know what used to be, not just in Wheeling, but in this area, because segregation was everywhere at that time. It changed about 1943, if I remember right. Brown versus Board of Education. Yeah. Yeah. So, any other questions? Yes. Yes. Is that right? Wow. I'd love to have that history.
I'm just sitting here thinking about it because I'm thinking I was in that building.
Right. Yeah, it was a beautiful building. Beautiful. That architect and the structure, as you can see from the one in Columbus, beautiful building. I can't believe it was just sat there and just, started eroding. Yes, sir. I thought I saw a hand back there. I'm sorry. I must be seeing things. It's probably a reflection out of my glasses. Any other questions? What? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. And from my standpoint, history is personal. If we don't make our history personal, then we're just talking, in the concept of what was. But when you can talk and relate, it means everything. That is so important because I'm used to sitting down, sharing conversation. Hey, I'll give you a prime example of that. I actually ran into a gentleman and we were talking, and at first, because I was dating the gentleman's daughter, he hated me. Now let me give you the last name, and maybe you can look at the concept of the culture. The last name when I was dating the gentleman's daughter was McFarland. So what's, the culture of that name? So he hated me, But after he realized I didn't date his daughter to try to get in good with, and this is how personal life works, to get in good with, thinking I had a free ride. I dated her because I thought we were friends, and you know how it goes. But then after we sat down, finally broke bread. He liked to drink champagne. And I said, okay. And we broke bread and we started talking. And I found out he was one of the individuals, his family, that put up the telephone post coming through Wheeling, way back. So that's the kind of history. History is personal. It's in the families. We should talk about what was our families, what went on. Whether it's good, we call it good or bad. It's not to be weighed. It's about being learned. We don't call it good or bad. We call it learning from each other. So once you accept what has went on, you move forward. That's the kind of history I've been doing all my life. I like personal history. So thank you for that. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much for your time and attendance, and have a good rest of the day.